It's an honor to be here. I'm really happy to be asked to come and do this. This particular subject is my favorite subject to talk about, frankly. Parent education is what got me into this field to start with. Initially, it was so that I wouldn't be like my dad. And subsequently, after that, it was because I found that I really enjoyed talking with people about this just absolutely important subject. So whether it's something that you're here to learn some things for yourself or learn some simple points that you can pass on to clients and other people, loved ones, whatever brings you here, I'm happy to have you here. And I really, really, really hope that some of the things that I have to say are going to be useful to you. A lot of what we talk about is going to come really fast, frankly, because I got a lot to cover in a short period of time. But a lot of the points that I'm going to try to make, I don't think you're going to hear them or see them other places, which means I really need to write a book. No, you'll find some of it, but most of it is just things that I've learned over the last 35 years of doing this, and is a great opportunity to pass it on to you. We always ask the question, do we think that people can change, right? And if you question that, Joseph, how come my slides are not forwarding? Let me do it this way. There we go. This is me just a few years ago. That's not an alter ego, that's really me. And so if you wonder if people can change, yeah, a little bit. They really can, I promise. So that being said, let's talk about some of the things that we want to accomplish today in the next 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes. Here's some of the key takeaways. I want to talk to you about having a parenting mission statement, and I'm going to make a suggestion for one that might be a little different than what a lot of people think of. I want to talk about two of the most important things that we can teach our kids, and that quite candidly, if we were successful in teaching just these two things to kids, life would teach them everything else that they needed to know. I want to talk about 5 words that come in 2 phrases that we need to get better at saying to our kids that I think are profoundly important in terms of developing a relationship and being able to accomplish our mission as parents. And then finally, I want to talk about the biggest thing that we as humans need, which is connection. And I want to talk about that, and I'll tell you a story that I learned from my son about that. So let's jump into it. To start with, ask yourself this: who taught you how to be a parent? And a lot of you will come up with different classes that you've taken or books that you've read. Great, that is to your credit. But I'm going to submit to you that the primary people that were responsible for your parent education were your parents. And if you have anything in common with me whatsoever, which if you don't, that's a good thing. But if you have anything in common with me, you had several times during your adolescence or early adulthood that you, in frustration, said, I will never do that to my kids. And it turns out that if you don't learn a different way to do it, you're going to do it the way that you were taught. And some of us who are parents have had that horrifying experience of opening our mouth to speak, and our parents talk. And we're like, whoa, that wasn't me. And it comes out, particularly at times of stress, because you're going to revert back to what you know the most, what you're most familiar with. And that's what you were taught all those years with intense, emotionally laden, one-on-one instruction from your parent or parents or caregivers. Okay, so think about that. Now let's talk about a mission statement. The mission statement, turns out, is a short statement of what the organization is all about, what its overall goal is, and what its operations are, right? That's what a mission statement is. So do we need a mission statement as parents? I think so, because if you know what you want, you're a lot more apt to be able to get it. So here we go. Your goal, your mission as a parent is to take just a minute and think about that. Think about how you would respond to that particular thought. And I'm going to tell you what I think. You've all got that in your head now. A lot of people stay to teach your kids to be healthy citizen, teach your kids how to obey, to teach, this, that, or the other thing. I'm going to submit to you that your goal, your mission as a parent is to manage the ability to teach your children how to manage their own behavior. So in other words, your job as a parent is to work yourself out of a job. Your job as a parent is to do a good enough job as a parent that sometime late adolescence, early adulthood, your kids don't need you. Hopefully they'll want to hang out with you, come home for, Sunday dinner, to have you do their laundry, whatever else it might be. But your job as a parent is to teach your kids how to manage their own behavior. So big question then, of course, is how do we do that? What's the best way to do that? That's what we're going to talk about, okay? So number one, mission statement is to teach your kids how to manage their own behavior. I believe that the two most important things that any of us can teach our kids or teach our loved ones to teach their kids, or in my case, teach my grandkids. I got 14 of those little darlings now, and I just want to tell you, grandkids are God's reward for not killing your kids. Being a grandpa is the coolest thing in the whole wide world. So, my favorite name, I get called a lot of things, but my favorite name is Papa. Oh, just melts me. Okay, two crucial things that we need to teach our kids. Number one, most important thing is that it's okay to make mistakes. But we got to teach kids how to make those mistakes responsibly. That means you own the mistake, acknowledge it, you talk about what you learned from the mistake, and then you move forward and you let it go. So mistake making, good mistake making means you own the mistake, you learn from the mistake, you implement the learning, and you move forward. And you leave it in the past. I remember doing a parent education course at UVU one time, and I was talking about corporal punishment, that I don't think it's a good idea to spank your kids. And I told the class a story about the one time in my history as a parent that I spanked one of my kids. It was my oldest boy, and I told the whole story about it. And it was before I knew anything about being a parent. I mean, it was 43 years ago now. And we were fishing, and my oldest son, caught his first fish. That's every dad's proudest moment, right? And he got so excited about it, he wet his pants. And we were in the midst of trying to potty train him. And so I didn't know what to do, so I swatted him on the butt. Took this amazing moment that was just like miraculous for me, and I ruined it. So I'm telling the class about it, I'm bawling, and I'd forgotten that this same son, now grown into a manhood, was the site facilitator for one of the remote sites. He grabs the mic and he goes, "Dad, it was 30 years ago, man, you gotta let it go." The class just busted out laughing, and he was right. We got to let it go. So make a mistake, own it, learn from it, implement the learning, and move on. Wrap your heart around the learning. Okay, so that's number one. It's the most important thing. Number two, pain in all its varieties is not the enemy. Doesn't have to be your best friend. I wouldn't suggest you go looking for it, but if you care about anything or anyone, you're going to experience pain. It's a part of life. So here's the kicker though. If we're going to teach our kids that it's okay to make mistakes, and the pain isn't the enemy, that it's a teacher, that begs the question, how do we do that? Because you can't sit there and talk this to your kids. They have to experience this with you. That's right. What I'm saying to y'all is in order for you to be a really good parent, you have to screw up. You have to blow it. You have to make mistakes in order to teach your kids that it's okay to make mistakes. Because if they see you make mistakes and make them responsibly with those 3 steps, they're not going to have to be afraid of their mistakes, and they're going to be able to come to you and say, Mom, Dad, I think I screwed up. I need some help. And they'll have the confidence that you'll be able to help them with that. Same thing is true with pain. And I'm not trying to tell you what to think, but I hear parents all the time say, I don't cry in front of my kids. What? That doesn't make any sense to me. So you're just lying to your kids. You're just faking it. How are your kids going to come to you with something that hurts if they've never seen you hurt? How are they not going to be afraid of their pain if they have the experience of you being afraid of yours? So what I'm saying to you is that the only way to teach your kids these 2 things is by example. They have to experience it with you, or they won't get it. They won't get it any other way. So those 2 things, okay to make mistakes, pain is not the enemy. 2 most important things that we can teach our kids. All right. Next step, 5 words I think we need to be able to say to our kids. It comes in 2 phrases. So here's the first 2 words. I'm sorry. Man, we got to get better at saying I'm sorry. And that has to do with the mistake-making part. That if we can make a mistake, we can come to our kids, say, I am so sorry. I think I really messed up. But here's what I think I learned from it. And here's what I want to do moving forward. Can we do that together? Your kids are going to be right there with you. The times that I have approached my kids this way, saying I'm sorry and talking about what I've learned and asking for their help to be a better dad, I've never had them say, no, you suck. I'm not going to do it. They're always just right there, willing to say, yeah, Dad, of course, we're good. Let's go forward. So first 2 words, I'm sorry. The second 2 words are, I don't know. I think we have to get off that pedestal that our kids keep putting us on. Your kids prior to the age of 12 think every time you open your mouth, it's like hearing God talk. You ain't him, I promise you. So you got to be willing to say, I don't know. Let's figure it out together. And approaching your kids with that kind of humility encourages them to learn, to explore, to be more open, to not see you as the perfect person that they're never going to be able to approach. If we could learn to say these 5 words to our kids, whoa, what an amazing difference it would make to them. I'm sorry, I don't know. Get used to saying those. It'll help you have some of the most amazing times you'll ever experience with your kids. All right, the one necessary condition that has to be in place to be an effective parent. Anybody guess what it is? I hope you can, because it was on that key takeaway slide. It's connection. Think about this. The Chief Seattle said, he said, all things are connected like the blood that unites us. We do not weave, the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. That is never more true than with our own children. All of us need connection. Maslow talked about it. People have talked about it from the beginning of time, how important connection is. So what kinds of connections? Those connections matter the most, but the parental connections, the connections you have with your kids and that your kids have with you are going to be the most influential, most important connections that they will ever have, anywhere, at any time. Even during adolescence, when kids' friends become so very, very important to them, the parental relationship still is the single most important relationship that your kids will ever have. Brene Brown says connection requires vulnerability and the courage to be authentic and genuine. So let me ask you a question about that. How much do you know about your parents? How much time could you fill in telling somebody about your parents and their lives? So now let's change that question a little bit and say, how much do your children know about you? How much do they know about times in your life that may not have been the most stellar times in your life? How willing are you to be vulnerable and to talk with your kids about where you've been, what you've done, and what you've learned? How well do you know your kids? I think one of the reasons that I did not have the kind of relationship that I wanted to have with my own father was because I didn't know him. He didn't tell me about him. I knew a couple of basic things that were almost like demographic things, that he grew up on a dairy farm in Nebraska, and that's about the size of it. I didn't know anything about him, so I couldn't feel close to him. Think about that connection you have with your kids and what forms it. I love this statement by a guy that some of you know. It's a guy named Gordon B. Hinckley, and he said this. I love this statement so much. He says, my plea, and I wish I were more eloquent of voicing it, is a plea to save the children. Too many of them walk with pain and fear, in loneliness and despair. Children need sunlight. They need happiness. They need love and nurture. They need kindness and refreshment and affection. I have a tremendous amount of love and respect for this man, and this is my favorite thing that he ever said. It's critical. So we've got lots of time left, so we're going to give you a bonus point. So we got those 4 points, right? The mission statement, the learning or teaching our kids about mistakes, about pain, 5 words, 2 phrases that we need to say to our kids, and how important connection is. Now you get a bonus point, but I gotta tell you a story first, since we have enough time to do that. Let me tell you where I learned about connection. Before I was a therapist, before I was even in school to be a therapist, I had 2 sons at the time, and I came home from work, and my little boy, who was like 3 or 4 at the time, was sitting around the corner of the house. He was crying. He was sitting on a cinder block crying. So I was alarmed, and I go running up there, and his name is Adam. And I said, Adam, what's up? What's going on? He very carefully talked about being over at the neighbor's house, playing with those kids over there. And somebody else came walking down the street, and the neighbor kid said, we don't want to play with you anymore. We don't want to play with him. You go home. And they sent him back. And it just tore him up. He was a really sensitive kid, and he's now a very sensitive and responsible father of 4. But he's still that sensitive man that he was back then. So my first instinct, like some of yours, was I'm going to jump up, I'm going to run over to the neighbor's house, and I'm going to set those little people straight. We had the neighborhood fun house. We had the swing set, we had the tramp, we had the tree house, we had all the fun stuff in our yard. So our yard was always full of kids, and those kids were some of the frequent benefactors of that playground that we had in the backyard. So I really wanted to go over there and say, look, you little people, you don't learn how to treat my son, you better than you got it. And something got me to not do that. And I stopped myself, and I just sat down on the cement next to him, so we were about level. And I looked at him and I said, son, that sucks. And he said, yeah. And I started talking to him a little bit about some memories I had of when I was little, being rejected, being sent away, not being accepted for who I was and what I brought. And I cried with him. And he looked at me as I was talking about that, and I'll never, ever, ever forget the feeling that I got when he looked at me and he said, Daddy, you know how I feel. The connection, you guys, was electric. It was incredible. And I remember saying, well, I probably don't know exactly what it feels like, but I got an idea. And we talked for a little while more, and I said, well, you want to come in the house? We can play some games and goof off. And he said this, I've never forgotten it. He said, no, I'm going to stay out here and finish crying. And I looked at him like, who are you? Well, it was about 20 feet from the corner of the house to the front door, and that was a long 20 feet to walk by myself, leaving him out there to finish crying. Turned out I learned in subsequent years that that was desperately important for me to do that. I walked in the house, offered up a little prayer, sort of ordering up some angels for my little boy. And he was out there maybe another 10 minutes, came back in the house, and we played for a while and goofed off. And 20 minutes later, he's back over the neighbor's house. And they all lived happily ever after. Here's the lesson I learned. My little boy didn't need me to fix it. Man, I wanted to go over there. I wanted to champion my son. I wanted to set those little people straight. But I'm so grateful for whatever force it was that got me to not do that, and to sit there and join my son in going through something that he experienced as being very painful and very difficult. You guys, our kids need that connection with us desperately. Please recognize that whatever you do with your kids, do it with the intent of preserving and enhancing the connection that you have with them. Okay, the bonus point that we have. I want you to play a little game with me. I want you to think of the first word that comes to your mind when I say this next word. Now, if you think about it for more than 1 second, you're cheating. So you really got to think about the first word that pops into your head when I show you this next word. You ready? Here we go. Think of the first word that comes to your mind when I say the word discipline. Now, if we were sitting in a room, I'd get lots of examples from you. And every time I've done this with people, I get examples of spanking, beating, punishment. The good ones get time out. It's all these different forms of discipline, of punishment for misbehavior. Let me ask you this. Look at that word and tell me what you think the root word of the word discipline is. Take a second look at that and see what you think. Turns out the root word of the word discipline is disciple. What's a disciple? A disciple is one who follows. Do you really want to follow somebody who's always looking for you to screw up? Who's watching your every move and is going to bust you and punish you or consecrate you for all the mistakes that you make? Why isn't discipline extra time with mom and dad, a trip to the park, warm cookies and cold milk? Why, for the love of Pete, why isn't discipline reinforcement for a job well done? Many of you have animal companions. Many of you have pets. And you try to teach them to do different things, whether it's stay, roll over, kill the neighbor. No, not that one, not that one. That's somebody else's job. You guys have all had the experience of training animal companions to do different things. And what do you have in order to do that? You have cookies, biscuits, milk bone dog treats, whatever it is that you use to incentivize and to reinforce successive approximations of the behavior that you eventually want to get. Anybody who's ever trained a dog to shake hands or roll over or any of the other things, sit, stay, all of that, you know that the way you train that animal to do those things that you want is a very small little treat. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Several years ago when my daughter was, I think she was 11, maybe four, no, she was 14. Yeah, she was 14. She called up and said, Dad, what are you doing over UEA break? And I said, I don't know, what am I doing? And she said, you and I are gonna go somewhere. I said, all right, where do you wanna go? She thought about it, she goes, SeaWorld. I was like, yeah, I love that place. So we jumped in the truck and we headed for SeaWorld, and we had a blast. Now, this was back in the days when the Shamu show was still up. This was back in the days where they had the killer whales doing all the tricks, pushing a diver through the water on its nose and up into a swan dive and all these amazing things. So here's this multi-ton ocean animal. I think of it as a fish. I know it's not a fish, but it's a giant fish in the water doing all these extraordinary things that do not come naturally to it in the wild, right? And what do these trainers have to get these animals, as intelligent as they are, what do they have to get them to do all these different, bizarre, amazing tricks? I'll tell you. They got a bucket of fish and squid, and they have their affection. That's it. So we're sitting there at the Shamu show at the SeaWorld, and they got baby Shamu there. And up on the Jumbotron, they got James Earl Jones talking about the relationship between the trainers and the animals, and I'm crying about this. My daughter looks at me and goes, oh, geez, Dad, and scoots over about 5 more feet. So nobody knows she's associated with me. That stuff just moves me. It really does. But we watched this happen. They got baby Shamu down there. He's up there talking about the relationship between baby Shamu and the trainer, and they all have individual trainers. So she stands there and she's patting him and scratching his tongue, which gave me an insane need to clean my fingernails. She's scratching his tongue and doing all these different things, patting him up, giving him little bits of fish. And then she stands up, holds up a great big old mackerel, and gives the visual cue for what she wanted baby Shamu to do. The visual cue was she went like this. Baby Shamu was supposed to swim around the pool and come back to that point, and she'd give him that big old fish. But baby Shamu didn't do that. Baby Shamu just sat there going, give me the fish, give me the fish, give me the fish. What do you think she did? She can't spank him. She can't send him to his room. Screaming at him isn't going to do any good. So here's what she did. She pulled that mackerel up close to her chest, and she turned around and faced the other way. She ignored him. She stood there for just a few seconds, turned back around, reached in a bucket of fish and squid, bleh, giving him fish and squid, patting him, scratching his tongue, doing all that. Stood up, did it again. This time baby Shamu swam around the thing, came back just like a champ. She jumped in the water and they had a party. She communicated very, very clearly the behavior that she wanted, and she de-emphasized the behavior that she didn't want. She didn't punish him. She reinforced him for doing what she wanted. Here's my question. Why does that seem so hard for us to do? Why are we so concerned about mistakes? Why, when I was a little kid and I'd get a test and I'd get that paper back, did it always have the number wrong instead of the number right? I think they do it different these days, but then I always got minus however many. And I can remember feeling so stupid because I got more of them wrong than I got right. Well, so why is it so hard? We train dogs, we train horses, we train all these animals using positive reinforcement. Why does it seem so hard for us to do? Well, we don't get any societal support. I can pretty much guarantee you that you will never, ever be pulled over by a police officer and issued movie tickets for driving well. I got a text this morning from my daughter. She texted me and I texted her back and I said, "What's up?" And she said, "Oh, I was going to tell you a funny story, but I just got pulled over and given a ticket. So I'm in a really bad mood now." You guys, she was going 24 miles an hour. He clocked her at 24 miles an hour in a 20-mile-an-hour zone, which we all know is a school zone. She was so upset about that. Well, I don't think if she'd have been going 19 or 20 miles an hour, I don't think he'd have pulled her over and said, "Way to go. So happy for you. Here's some movie tickets." 4 miles over the speed limit as she was accelerating from a stop, he gives her a ticket. So we don't do that with each other. We don't do that in society. It's part of why it's so difficult. The other reason that we don't do it with our kids and with each other is because nobody ever showed you how to. Why didn't your parents do it with you? Because nobody did it with them. But y'all are mental health professionals and you have the opportunity, dare I say, responsibility to change the world that we live in. That's why you do what you do, is because you believed and you can change the world. How were you graded when you were a kid? Did you get the number right or the number wrong? We just talked about that. And that's what was done to us as kids. That's why it seems so hard, and more than anything else, y'all, it's what we do to ourselves. If I were to come up to you and offer a bunch of compliments or observations of something that I see that you do very well, you'd go, no big deal. I did it earlier with Joseph and Jake when they were telling me that the last time we did this kind of thing, we had great response. And I was like, yeah, well, that's all about the subject matter. I couldn't take a compliment. It's so uncomfortable for us. But if they'd have given me criticism, oh, I'd have been there going, eating it with a fork and a knife and swallowing it every way I could. Why? Why do we do that to ourselves? Again, it's what we do to ourselves more than anything else. So I want you to think of it a different way. If you think about the kids or your own colleagues, partners, whoever, you think of their misbehavior as being dark, and I think it's useful to think of it that way. How do you make the dark go away? All right, y'all, you've known this since you were a little bitty baby. When you come into a dark room and you want it to be light, you run around in the dark room, examining all the nuances of the darkness, trying to figure out what's causing the darkness and what the problem is here, all of that. No. What do? You go find a light switch and you turn on the light. You guys, this is what I want to leave you with, is the idea that this is what we need to do with each other. It's what we need to do with ourselves. It's what we need to do, profoundly need to do with children. We have got to help them see their light. We've got to help them see what they do well. And it's my experience that, and especially my experience when I was working with addicts, is that we help them see their light, the dark stuff goes away. I was clinical director of a couple of different rehabs, adult and adolescent. And what I learned is it didn't do a whole lot of good to talk much about addiction. They knew more about it than I did anyway. Probably not going to tell them much that they didn't already know. And aside from talking to them about the neurochemical basis for addiction, which helped them put away some of the shame that they felt from it, aside from that a little bit, we never talked about addiction. We talked about what they wanted instead of what they don't want. Why are we always worried about trying to get rid of something and talking about it all the time? Why do we spend 24/7 talking about something we're trying to help them get rid of? That never made any sense to me. So we talked about other things. We talked about what they wanted. We talked about their life purpose. We talked about their values, their goals. And as we did that, my experience was the things that created and maintained the addiction evaporated. We coined the phrase that we would illuminate and eliminate. their shadows and the darkness. I think we need to do that with ourselves, with each other, and most certainly with our children. I love this statement by Levenger that says, the chief value of a parenting theory may well be in providing a model for the child of curbing one's own impulses out of respect for the future welfare of another. I love that. Now, I'm not here to try to change your parenting theories, but I'm here to give you some ideas, to give you some things that you can think about, that you can implement, that you can put to work. It's very practical stuff. And as I said, I don't think you're going to read a lot about it in parenting books, but it's what my time as a parent, I'm 43 years now as a parent and step parent. It's what those years have taught me. And it's a privilege to have the chance to pass that stuff on to you guys. I want to leave some time to close, and I want to leave some time for questions. Hopefully some of you have entered some questions in the chat room and we can address those. What do we got, Jake or Joseph?
Yeah, let's see. Does anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask Davee at this time? Anything related to maybe a technique or something that maybe you're hoping that he can give you a tip with? I know we also have some school counselors with us. You know, maybe you have a difficult parent or something and you're just not reaching. I'm sure that Davee would be happy to share some of his insight with you.
I'd love to. I'd even welcome some arguments. If some of you think I'm full of hot air, speak up.
Here's a question. How do you help parents recognize how important positive attention is?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, there's a couple of principles that you can teach parents as mental health professionals that are kind of cardinal behavioral principles. And one of the most important ones is whatever you pay the most attention to is what you're going to get more of. And it doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative attention. Kids don't differentiate that. In fact, I watched this happen. I was visiting a family one time that had this little, about a year and a half, 2-year-old kid. And I was visiting with the parents, me and this other guy, and their little girl kept coming in and interrupting, and they kept shooing her away. And 3 times they shooed her away, and the last time the little girl comes in, stood right in the middle of the room, pulled her britches down and peed on the carpet. It was awesome. Parents were so embarrassed, and I just sat there thinking, good for you, little girl. I mean, what's she got to do to get their attention? And yeah, she got trouble for that, but it didn't matter. She wanted their attention, and she was going to get it one way or the other. So, in working with parents, it's not just about positive reinforcement as a theory. It's about helping them recognize that whatever they pay the most attention to, they're going to get more of that. And just helping them see it as a scientific principle.
Great. It looks like Cindy, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. When do you tell a parent enough is enough? I have one that because of her alcoholism, she had said verbally abusive things to her children, and now she has been free of alcohol for about 9 years and lives her life really well. And yet her children still will not have anything at all to do with her. Should she continue to send cards, letting them know, here I am, here's my updated phone number? Or is she invading their space and enough is enough, quit sending cards and reminders?
That is such a great question. We get asked questions all the time from family members of addicts. I don't want to enable my kid, or, you know, and this mom's enabling them to be little poops with her. And so, yeah, when does she pull the plug on that? Here's what I'm going to say to you. That whole enabling thing, and you can say that this is just my idea, that it's not couched in any sound addiction medicine principle, but in my way of thinking, if you don't shoot them, you're enabling them. The question is, what are you enabling them to do? The answer to that is you don't know. And it's frankly none of your business. So that mom is sending those cards and letters and phone calls and updated information because, why? Because she wants to. And my recommendation to that mom would be, keep doing it then. Yeah, you're being abused. Your good nature is being taken advantage of. Be clear about that. But if that's her truth, and if that's what she believes, and most of all, if that's what she wants to do, then by all means do it.
Okay.
With hope that continuing to shine that light will help to illuminate the shadow of the past with her kids. And that at some point, and I've seen it happen literally hundreds of times, the kids will come back and go, all right, enough already. I want to find out for myself. This is all the stuff I've been told. Now I want to find out for myself. Mom, who are you? So my recommendation to that sweet lady is to keep doing what she wants to do with faith in her kids and the hope that they'll come around and see the light.
Great. And let's see, it looks like, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Is it Marja? Did you have a question as well?
Hello, it's Maria. I really love what you've taught us here, Davey, and I appreciate that. I'm a school counselor and I talk with a lot of parents, not a lot. It seems like a lot. It feels like a lot, but in my alphabet who have students or their own children that struggle with attendance, don't want to get out of bed, have nausea in the morning because they're too anxious to get to school. And the parents come and talk to me without their kids there, and they're like, what do I do? How do I fix this? They're like, it's such a loss for even a way to just get their kids out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
So, I really love what you said about pay attention to what, pay attention to the behavior and you'll get what you'll give kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what's some advice I can give them?
So here's my thinking about that. All behavior has a payoff. You get up in the morning because there's a certain payoff. You go to work as a school counselor because you love trying to help those kids and their family members. And dare I say, you get paid a modest amount of money for what you do. So that's why you get up and go to work every day. There are rewards for what you do, and that's what sustains your behavior. If you weren't able to have some sense of efficacy with those parents and kids, and if you weren't getting paid to do what you do, I'm going to suggest to you that you would not get up every morning and go to work.
True.
So those kids are not getting out of bed and going to school because there's no reward in it for them. The benefits of staying in bed and being slugs are greater than the rewards of going to school and being productive people. Somehow we have to turn that around. We have to make it more worthwhile for the kid to be able to get up and do something productive than to lay in bed and just soil their sheets. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes, yeah. And I know this is a home thing, right? It's something they have to figure out at home for sure.
Yeah, but school too. I mean, the teachers, I can tell you, I was the worst student in elementary and junior high and high school. Do you know what my graduating GPA from high school was? Cumulative GPA? 0.4. Not 4 point, 0.4. The boys' dean wrote in 0.7 to get me out of there because they didn't want me back for another year. He nearly doubled my GPA just to get rid of me. I redeemed myself, y'all. My graduating GPA from the University of Utah with my master's degree was a 3.985. And do you know why? Because I was married to somebody who refused to believe that I was too dumb to do college. That's why. Her belief in me and her faith in me got me through that and helped me learn that I wasn't nearly as stupid as I thought I was. But when I was a kid, I didn't have any reason to go to school, so I didn't. There wasn't anything in it for me. I just went and felt stupid, got picked on, got bullied. I don't want to go. So we got to figure out two things with these kids and help the parents do it. And we got to do it at school too. Figure out what's going on that gets them to not want to go, and then figure out what we can do that would get them to want to go. And the relationship, the connection I talked about a little bit ago. Well, let me tell you a story about that. So I was the dumbest kid on the planet when I was little, okay? And, well, maybe not all dumbest, but right up there, top 10% probably. But I had this third grade teacher. I still remember her name was Miss Lowenstein. She was this little short dark-haired woman from New York, and she had a real thick New York accent. And she was my spelling teacher. So we had a spelling test, and she had 2 extra credit words on there. It was dictionary and transportation. Y'all, I can't remember what I had for dinner last night, but I still remember this from third grade. Dictionary and transportation. I learned to spell those really fast. So I had them nailed. Went to school and took a spelling test, and I got both those bonus points right and a bunch of the other ones right. And Miss Lowenstein in front of the whole class said, "Well, Davee Chandler, you're a really good speller." Guess what? I am. And you know why? Because Miss Lowenstein told me I was, and that gave me a connection with her. She said my name in front of the whole class and gave me a compliment that I could own. And it influenced the rest of my life. My 4th grade teacher, Miss Janet Watkins, oh, love of my life. I remember going to the park for a 4th grade picnic one time, and she reached out to give me my little carton of milk, and her hand brushed mine, and I nearly fainted. I was so hopelessly in love with Miss Watkins, I can't even tell you. And she called me up to her desk one time, and I thought, this is it. She's going to profess her undying love for me. And instead, she leaned forward and looked at me and said, "Davee, I'm really disappointed in you. I wanted to die. I was embarrassed, humiliated, ashamed, and never spoke to her again." So why aren't the kids coming to school? I don't know. What can we do to get them to go to school? Teachers can do a lot with that. Parents can do a lot with that. But that's the magic, is figure out what the reward is for them not going. Alter that reward into being a reward for going. And we're going to see some change in behavior at some point. It won't happen all of a sudden because they won't believe you at first. But over time, it happens.
All right, thank you.
Of course.
Let's see. We got some really good questions that came in not too long ago. I want to see, someone here asked if you have any ideas about parenting adult children.
Yeah, you know, the same principles hold. We're talking about a little bit work with adult children, and they work with each other, and they even work with ourselves. You guys, we got to start reinforcing ourselves for the behavior that we want to see in ourselves. And you'll get more of it because that principle, that behavioral principle of whatever you pay attention to, you'll get more of. Most certainly works with adult children. But it's the same kind of thing, the ability to say, okay, I want to try to help them manage their own behavior. How do I do that? I want to teach them about mistakes and about pain, and I want to go through that with them. I want to join them in that, like my little son taught me that he needed me to join him, not fix it for him. And being able to say, I'm sorry, and I don't know. Those things, and that along with the positive reinforcement, it's the same principles with adult kids.
Great. And maybe you touched on this already briefly, but Trent is asking if there's any practical advice on how to break the negative reinforcement cycle.
Oh, persistence, really. And the closer to home you have it, the better off you're going to be. And it's just persisting because we live in a negatively based world. And so we're not going to change that out there per se, at least not immediately, but we can change it inside our own homes. And persistence, dogged determination to change that negative pattern that exists in the world.
Great. Alex is asking how we can help parents who strongly believe in corporal punishments and struggle to see a different point of view.
My suggestion is to use it on them. No, not really. It's a tough thing. It really is a tough thing. And but let me tell you this, based on research, you know why people spank their kids? The top two reasons why. The number one reason why people spank their kids is they didn't know what else to do. Good grief, go to the bookstore, buy a book. I mean, half of Barnes and Noble is full of self-help and parenting books. So go buy a book for Pete's sake. They all tell you not to spank your kids. So that's the number one most cited reason for spanking kids is that they didn't know what else to do. The second thing is that's what was done to me and I turned out okay. You sure you're beating on your kids? Not sure that's true, but okay. Bottom line is if somebody's got an idea in their mind, you can't blast it loose with dynamite. And the best you can do is the best you can do. And try to reinforce those kids. And if you have the chance to do something different with those kids, do it.
Here's a good one. It looks like someone asked, any good advice on helping parents who are easily dysregulated because of trauma responses in how to regulate before parenting or disciplining?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And obviously they need to be in some therapy to get regulated from all that dysregulation and be able to heal the trauma that they've been through. But let me tell you, teaching just some specific skills, like I learned with my kids that I got a hair trigger because of how my dad was with me. And when my kids would goof up and do something wrong, or if they get lippy with their mom, man, I could feel that right arm hitching back just like it did with my dad. And I didn't want to do that. So I had to do something different. What I learned was to look at my kids and laugh at them. I know that sounds kind of goofy, but when they started getting lippy with me or with their moms, I just look at them and go, really? That's the best you got? Come on, give me some more, And we'd start laughing about it. And I learned that if I couldn't see the humor in a situation, I was going to be in trouble. So I learned different skills. And if you can help parents just say, okay, what you're doing doesn't seem to be working. Let's try something that right in that moment, you can try something different. And give them some ideas. I had an old couple, real quick, I'll just say this. I had an old couple that came to see me. They wanted some divorce mediation. They've been married for like 40 years or 50 years, something like that. They were old. And I'm like, oh man, this is so sad. How come? And they started talking about this cycle that they would get into. And they'd just go round and round and round. Kind of an emotional abuse cycle. And I talked to the woman, I'll call her Gladys, because that was her name, Gladys. And I said, Gladys, I think you're creative. You can do something different instead of always doing the same thing. She said, what? And I said, I don't know, you're creative, think of something. They came in a couple of weeks later and the guy was kind of all like smirking, and then Gladys is walking a little lighter. And I said, what's up with you guys? She said, well, you talked to us about doing something different, doing anything different. I said, yeah. She said, well, I did. And I said, well, what'd you do? She said, well, we started into the same old cycle that we always did, and I want to do something different. And then the guy speaks up and goes, she mooned me. This old lady got up on the dining room table, dropped her britches and stuck her butt right in his face. Stop the argument. They both started laughing and they realized that they could do something different and were able to work things through and they stayed married.
That's great. Here's a question. I hope I'm understanding it. Someone asked, what about children who live away from home but need help, asking for help, and then refuse the help when provided?
Well, it sounds like every teenager I've ever met. And 2-year-old, my little 2-year-old granddaughter, you can say, do you want this? And she'll go, no. And then she gets mad at you for not giving it to her. Yeah, that's going to go on for about the next 18 years, I think. But again, persistence, living your truth, standing in your light, speaking that truth and being that way, I think is the most important thing that we can do.
Great. Noelle is asking if you have any experience working with reactive attachment disorder. Some of the techniques that she's shared don't seem to work well with specific children with attachment issues. And she's wondering if you have any insights into children who don't receive love well or who constantly push people away.
You know, there's all kinds of ways to connect, and it may not be that physical connection. I'm a hugger because I'm a biker. And so I hug people, and I hug the pudding out of my kids and my grandkids, but rad kids don't respond well to that. So you find other ways. But there are other ways to reinforce the behaviors that we want. And even with the reactive attachment disorder kids, and oh, stars, those are tough kids. They'll challenge the skills of the best of us. But persistence with figuring out, okay, what is important to this kid and how can I use that to reinforce them instead of what I think they want?
Here's another good question. How do you approach the subject of parents giving devices to regulate children's emotions?
Oh, goodness, maybe we should spend a whole session on that one. Back when I was a kid, it was the one-eyed babysitter. My mom called it the one-eyed monster. It was this little 16-inch black and white TV that us kids would just be glued to. This is not a new phenomenon, you guys. Back in the day, it was TV. In my day, it was black and white TV. But still, there wasn't anything we wanted more than to sit in front of that stupid TV and watch cartoons. It isn't any different now, y'all. The biggest difference is that we carry them with us. I couldn't take that TV to school with me. So instead, they wheeled in a TV and they showed us stuff in the classroom. Anyway, screens have always been an issue. Parents that use a TV, that use a phone, that use an iPad, use a computer as substitute parents are going to struggle with it. It just is a struggle.
Here's a good question. What's the best way to implement these tools with co-parenting where the other parent is very set in their cultural ways?
So my 3 oldest kids grew up with me as an absentee father, and I had 2 stepkids. So I co-parented with their moms. Yeah, 2 moms, plural. And so we co-parented them together, and that became the most important thing in the world, is for us to be able to co-parent our kids together. They saw things one way, I saw things other ways, and the kids got to figure that out. Let me tell you a real quick story. I remember my oldest son, when he was 14 years old, got asked to give a talk in church, and he stood up there and he said, I have 2 moms, 2 dads, I have 4 sets of grandparents, I have innumerable aunts and uncles, and I don't even know how many cousins I have. And I'm an only child. And he lived out in Lakeshore, and all the farmers were scratching their head going, huh? And then he explained what it was, and he said, and they all love me, and they're all here. We had the whole part of that chapel there. And he said, and here's the thing. My mom is really strict, really by the book. She's very conservative and just really kind of uptight. And my dad is really not. That's all I could think of saying. And he said, and they both love me, and I get to figure out what my truth is, and they support me in that. And I remember his mom and I leaning forward and looking at each other, just nodding our heads, saying, okay, we're doing something right. You don't have to be exactly the same. And when you're co-parenting, that connection is never more important than when you're co-parenting kids.
Great. Yeah, we have a lot of great comments in the chat, people just recognizing how useful all this information is. Was there anyone who still had a question, maybe that's still on, that would like to ask that? I may have briefly gone over your comment, or maybe you thought of something at the last minute. We do still have a couple minutes since Davee's still on, if you want to ask that now.
I was going back. There are so many chats there, Davey, that I couldn't even find my question to you. The question basically is, you were so vulnerable and you shared with us some of your learning experience. My question is, what do you do so that you can stay present and centered? I love the story about you come home and your little boy's sitting there on the bricks and he's crying, and you figured out a way to be there. And my guess is that you've developed that discipline over time of being present and not, just going out there and screaming at the neighbors. So what do you find helps you with that? Because I think that's something that would benefit all of us.
I think that comment by Brene Brown about being willing to be vulnerable and have courage and be open to learning from each other and from our kids. It is such an unspeakable honor to work in the profession that I work in, to be a therapist and to have the unbelievable privilege of being taught by people all day, every day. It's the greatest thing in the world. So a lot of what I know I've learned from my kids and I've learned from my clients, to be honest with you. Done a fair amount of reading. I'm kind of a book freak, but most of what I know I learned from my kids, from my partners, and from, frankly, my clients who come in.
So what's your method to shorten the learning curve? Because I'm learning from my kids and my clients, but if we could speed that up. My kids are at the age now where they're starting to have kids and dealing with some of these relationships things, and I'd love to find a way to shorten that learning curve, because at 56, there's things I know now that I sure wish I would have known when I was 25 and having kids.
There's some great books out there. My favorite parenting book is a book by Karen Pryor called Don't Shoot the Dog. She's a trainer of ocean animal trainers and realized that as she utilized those techniques with her kids and as her trainers did with their kids, they had incredible families. And so she wrote a book about it. And it's just called Don't Shoot the Dog by Karen Pryor, spelled Pryor. But there's a ton of books out there that you can read that I think would help shorten the learning curve, but there is no substitute for experience. And so being willing to make mistakes, to engage with things that you find painful and do that with your kids and grandkids, I think is the quickest way to be able to learn there is.
Great. Thank you, Davee. Did anyone have any other question really quick before we let Davee go? I know we're a little past the hour.
That's okay.
If not, thank you everyone for being here today. I think I speak for everyone, Davee, when I say that we learned so much today. So thank you again for imparting your knowledge to us. I think we find it very valuable, and there's a lot of great techniques here. Again, anyone who's interested in reviewing this, I hope to have it up on our YouTube channel at the end of the week. So watch for that. And again, thank you for coming.
Thank you again very much, everybody who was here.